Hi, welcome to Fawns and Porter's Freeform block of the month. You are tuning in for the final lesson in this series, lesson number 6. I am your host, Jenny K. Parks. If you want to know more about me, you can check me out on my website, Facebook, or YouTube at Jenny K. Quilts. Today, we're going to cover the center medallion and the final assembly for this quilt. We have a lot of territory to cover, so let's get started. All right, so starting in the very middle, this block is the very center of the medallion. It's on point like that. And it's just like compass block number 1. So if you need to refer back how to put this one together, check out what we filmed on compass block number 1 in the first lesson. And there's that part. Then we have to make corners for this. And there's going to be 4 corners. Here's a couple of them. 4 corners that are going to fit in there. And this is just like the units in compass block number 2. So you can check out if you need to refer to those again. But I'm sure you've made a lot. I'm sure you can recognize these by now and say, oh yeah, I know how to do that one. All right, then we need to make the side units. And let me show you how those are going to go together. All right, and here like this. Yep, there, that one goes there. That one goes there. So you can see we have our regular ice cream cone, and we have this center part, and then we join these edges. We've done all of these same things before. Well, let me show you just a little bit more of how that's going to look and all go together for you. So what I did when I was sewing this, I put these together, I sewed that on, and then I sewed them all together like so. And here is what you get. This piece right here. And these are your sides, part of your sides that are going to go on the center block there. And I've added one of the corners on. Let me show you how I added the corners. You have to be careful in this because I think a couple times I turned them around and I got them going in the wrong direction. So again, I'm a big fan of laying it out and making sure that you can see what you're doing and that you're going everything is lining up and going in the right direction. So let me sew that for you. Get these out of the way. Because what we want to join these two together right here, and we want to make them look as good as we possibly can. Now, you may have been going through this and thinking, why sometimes are my blocks not square like they are if I make a 9 patch or something? And it has a lot to do with the bias. Remember, we are dealing with bias edges all over the place. So things are going to skew. They're going to be a little bit weird and wonky sometimes. An advantage to that, though, that we know that it's bias, is that we can also stretch things out and adjust them to the right size, knowing that they will stretch and they'll land in the position that we want them to be in. So here I want to put these guys together. This one, I would really have liked it if I could have gotten the point to land at exactly 1/4 inch, but I didn't. I'm close. This one here, that point in that intersection is really good. I like that one. So I'm going to line these up as close as I can so that it will fool the eye into seeing everything go together. So let me put these guys together here. And there I can clearly see the X in the gray thread. I can see the X. Remember, X marks the spot, and that's what I want to sew over. So I'm going to line that up really well in the right spot on this other side. And see, I think that is pretty good. So I'm going to make sure, I'm going to put a pin there. Oh, I'll grab my pin cushion. I'm going to put a pin there, kind of where they meet. I don't want to go too much farther. That's quite a lot to have to adjust. You know what? I think I'm going to change my mind a little bit there. I'm going to move it a little closer. You really don't want to swerve for the curve more than about 1/8 of an inch if you can at all avoid it, okay? That just skews things too much. And then we encounter the problems of ripping it out, and when you rip it out, you know, the curved stuff starts to stretch. You lose the integrity of that piece that you worked so hard to cut out. So we're going to give this a try and put this on here. And I'm going to match up the other ends really well there and there. And here we're going to sew. All right. And I'm not overly worried about the block not measuring up exactly, not being, you know, not looking right while I'm sewing here. My concern is that I get it together as best I can. And then what I ended up doing when I put the whole center part together, and I think I did this when I would get the individual units together, like we have these side units that are going to go together. When I would assemble that, I would block it. I put them on my design wall. I spritzed them with water really well, and then I blocked it. I kind of stretched it out into the position it needed to be in and let it dry, and then I did that a couple times until it was the shape that I wanted it to be. Now I know some people will use special feet for curved piecing, or they have other different secrets. I'm just sharing with you what worked best for me so that I could get the results that I wanted to get this quilt finished and have it look lovely. And I think it does. I like it. All right. Let me press this. And I'm just going to press this to the side here. It's a little bulky. I could press it open, but I'm just going to press kind of in one direction here this time. All right. So when you were putting all of this together, there we go. So I'd have this here, and I'd put a top section on the top and the bottom, and then I'd have two of these going the opposite direction, like you can see in your instructions, and then I would put them together like that. So you kind of assembled the whole center medallion in that same method. So you have like 3 strips that you're going to put together, 3 units. Okay. Now we have our corner units. And this, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have not done a lot of miters, but we are about to tackle the mitered corners. And to be honest, it makes me a little nervous. It does. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I haven't done a lot of them. But I know you might be a little nervous as well. But we're going to get through it, and we're going to do just fine. Okay, so here is our center part, our corner units that we're going to make. And first we're going to start with this, and I'm just going to start with the smaller one. You put the smaller one on first, and the longer one on second. I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but believe it or not, I did it wrong when I was doing it at home. Somehow I goofed it, and it didn't quite work, and I had to rip it out. Brilliant. But anyways. All right, so let's sew this on here. I'm going to press that, and then I'm going to kind of pull it as I press, because I want this to be straight and flat. It's very important that you have that crisp seam like I've talked about. Very important in these steps here. All right, put on this one. And here we're creating the corner that we're going to add our binding, our mitered borders onto. And again, I'm kind of going to pull this guy up, and I'm going to fiddle with it a little bit. It's not quite so straightforward. It's an unusual seam that we're making. It's kind of an unusual angle. It doesn't press the way you would kind of predict it. But there we go. We got this pressed and ready to go. Now we need to make the borders that we're going to put on. Set that off to the side. All right. Now, there's a couple things with these borders that I want to point out. One is that with the pressing, I have a couple tricks with pressing. Because we're going to miter together and you want those stripes to meet exactly, I have a few tricks to help you to do that. I'm just going to show you putting the whole thing together and pressing it. So our blue goes in the middle. And because it's the purple with the light blue, I'm going to press away from the middle. Okay, so for pressing it, as I said, I'm going to press towards the dark, but I have a little technique that I came up with that I think is going to make, that certainly made it more accurate for me. All right, so I'm going to heat up the seam a little bit, and then what I did is I folded it back. Just get this a little closer to me. I folded it back, and I ran my thumb through the seam. And as I was doing it, I can kind of hear a little, you know, my thumbnail going along the threads there. I could hear that. And that ensures that you're going to get the sharpest seam that you can. The other issue with this, because it's just strips that can sometimes happen, is you can press a curve in there, and we want to avoid that absolutely. If you have lines on your ironing board, some people have a grid, or if you can visually line it up with the edge or something, do that so that you can make sure it stays as straight as possible. All right, so there's that one. So last time we sewed with the blue up, I'm going to sew, and we started sewing from this direction. I'm going to start sewing from this direction because you want to, like, so we went this way. Now we're turning the strip around, and we're going to go kind of up the other side, because that can help to control the curve that you might end up getting as well when you're piecing long strips. I'm going to do that, and then we'll press again. All right, I'll come and press this one. Warm up my strip here. Make it more compliant. And again, we're going to press towards the purple, press towards the dark. And I'm going to put my thumb in there, kind of run it down and make sure that everything is open. Yeah, I did kind of my usual just folding technique when you do a strip. You know, you just flip it back and fold it. And I found that I had all kinds of little curvies and little folds in there that weren't supposed to be in there. So I thought I would show you this. I think it takes a little extra attention. There we go. There's your strip. If you do find a little curve or something, spritz it, lay it flat, and press it again. Make sure it's right. You could even lay a ruler across there that I've done just to make sure it's really straight. Okay. So here we have our little corner segment, and we're going to start to add the miters. Oh, this is exciting. Now, there's a couple things you need to do to prepare when you're going to miter. You need to leave, so a miter, just in case you aren't aware of that, a miter is where they're going to kind of fold, two borders are going to fold, and they're going to meet together at a diagonal 45-degree angle. To do that, what I've done here, I take this little tool, I love this little tool, and I line it up, and I take a marking pin, any kind of pin you need to be able to see that, and I've lined it up, and it measures 1/4 of an inch from both sides on lots of different angles, but I only need this one. Measured 1/4 of an inch, and then you just mark it. And don't be afraid, like I said, of using any kind of marking pin that you need to be able to see. I've used water erasable, I've used red ballpoint, I've used pencil, whatever you need to be able to see that little part. So there you can see, I've got my little dots, and I have one on each corner. Let me make it darker here. Those are the dots where I'm going to start and stop sewing. And when I stop, I'm also going to back stitch just a little bit, just a couple of stitches. You want to secure that because you're going to be kind of manipulating and folding things, and you don't want that exact measurement to disappear, or you don't want those threads to pull out and you'll lose that measurement. Okay, so one trick, very important with this one, is that I'm going to take my first strip here and I'm going to apply it to this side where I also put the short one on first. That's, yeah, I had to rip that out. It didn't quite work if you put it on here on this side first. So I'm going to put it on this side where I stitched the shorter strip. I'm going to fold this in half. So you've got kind of a half measurement here. You could press it, but I don't really think it's necessary. And then you're going to fold the piece that you're sewing it onto and do the same thing. Get a little fold there. And I'm going to put those together. And then I'm going to pin into place. I'm hiding my pins from myself. That doesn't help anything. All right. I'm going to pin those into place and then just stitch down. Now, I'm stitching from this side because I'm going to start at that pink dot, and I'm going to do just a couple of stitches there, make a knot, however your machine works. And here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come down here to this one and do that again. And then we'll press. All right, sometimes lining this up is the trickiest part. I'm going to put my needle down in there. If you have a clear foot, this is perfect time to use a clear foot so you can see really well. I've secured that. They really are, I think mitered borders really are neat. I think by the time, what I tend to get is the mindset by the time I'm at the border, it's like, I just want to be done. But this, especially on the inside of a quilt, boy, it is really, I think is really neat. All right, so we're going to press this way. And notice I'm kind of picking this up and I'm pulling it a little bit to help keep things nice and straight and sharp. We want that sharp, crisp thing. These are lines where, I'm sorry to say, you're just not going to be able to fool your eye very well with this one. It's going to kind of have to be as straight as you can possibly do it. All right, next one. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to fold it in half again. Press down that section so you can see it really well. Then I'm going to fold this in half all the way to the border, okay? Make sure I've got my halfway mark there. Line those up. And you can mark it if you want to on the fabric. Use a little marking pencil or something. I think the little fold works well enough for you to be able to see, and you're only going to need it for just a little tiny bit. And I would be concerned if you marked the front that whatever you use to mark it with might not come off. Now, we're going to sew, and I'm going to stop. And see where I stopped there? That's where I'm going to stop again. I'm going to start here at this end and be sure I stop right there. I don't even want to go one stitch over. Now, I talked earlier in earlier videos about the how the your quarter-inch foot probably has marks on it, indicating what is in front, like a quarter of an inch in front of your needle, a quarter of an inch behind, and exactly at. You can also use those as a guide to when you are in the right spot. see, that's exactly where I stopped. You have a little corner right there, okay? That's what you want to see to make the magic happen. That's what you're going to need to do. All right. So then I'm also going to press this. Let's see, I pressed that one the other way. I'm going to press this one in the same direction. It gets a little turned around here, doesn't it? Do the same thing, because I want the same type of seams to deal with it. Whichever direction you choose to press, try to be consistent on both sides of this. All right. Now here is, you look at this going, how? What do I do with this, Jenny? I'm scared. I know, I'm with you. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to fold this. We're going to line up our borders like so. And then we're going to fold here. You see, we've got this. That's creating our 45-degree angle. Okay? I'm going to take my ruler, a little ruler, and my marker here, my pencil. Lay it on there and draw that line at 45 degrees. Put that mark on there. Now, I'm going to stitch right here along this line, and I'm going to stop right there, okay? And I'm going to put some pins in because I want things to match up really well. Now, this is where it gets tricky. And in fact, I'm going to test it here really quick. I'm going to pin right along my stitching line. And remember I talked about how you can kind of get a feel for it if your seams are nesting really well or if they're not. Here we want them to stack on each other, so we want them to like feel a big drop off where the seam is. But I'm going to pin these together. Let's fold it back and see if our corners are going to meet beautifully. Oh, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. Yes, I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch it and I'm going to baste it. So let me see if I can find a little larger stitch here. Increase my stitch length a little bit. Basting is a good old-fashioned dressmaking and garment construction trick. You baste it to kind of make sure that everything's just right, and then you're going to do a smaller stitch. So a basting stitch is just a little bit larger than your regular stitch. For example, my regular stitch is 2.5. My basting stitch, I'll move it up to 3.5 or even 4. Oh, my foot wants to push things up, so I'm going to pick up my foot. Get that out of the way. I'll take my pins out as I go. I'm sewing as straight on that line as I possibly can. And I'm going to stop right when I meet that other place, the previous stitching line. All right, so we basted, and this is kind of just checking. The reason for basting stitches is because it doesn't take as much thread, it's really quick, and you can pull it out really easily. Because the stitches are so much bigger, they're much easier to rip. How did I do? Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, I feel like it's just a skosh. No, I can work that. And this one is just a little bit. Sometimes you find it with your pressing that you can make it work when you press it. And we want to make sure also that it lies nice and flat here. So, and you also, when we press it at the end, you'll see how I can get it to be nice and flat as well. So I'm going to change it to the regular stitch, 2.5. No, that's what it was before. Okay. And stitch. And this time I am going to make a tiny knot at the end. You could, depending on the colors of your fabric, we could have pressed the, like away from the blue, I got a little swerve there, away from the blue on one and towards the blue on the other in the border strips, and that might make them easier to nestle. My concern is with the dark purple and the light blue, I'm afraid that it would show, so I just chose to avoid that, but you can try it and see if that works better for you. Now we'll see. And I'll be honest with you, there were a couple of the borders that I did that I had to do them a couple of times to get them right. And here we're going to press this open. Look at that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think when I was making the quilt, like I said, I redid a few. So don't worry about that if that's the case, okay? It's going to take some time to do that. So look at that. Oh, I'm really happy with that. So then what you would do is just take your ruler and trim off 1/4 of an inch from the line. I almost did that by mistake, trim there. You want to trim it 1/4 of an inch from the line and press that open. The open there helps it to seat really nicely. Like I said, sometimes I think when we have a bulky seam or a seam and we're trying to get something that's really accurate, if we press it open, that gives us greater accuracy for that part. So there you go. That's how to put it together. There's another one that I've already trimmed apart that, so you can see there how I pressed that seam open. Then what you would need to do, the final part to get this ready to go to the center that we've already put together, is you're going to need to trim it here. So what I found is I had to kind of adjust on this corner, but not much on anything else. So you just trim here, and then it'll go on to the rest of the center of our medallion on our quilt. There you go. Oh, no, wait, I have one more important thing, and this is important. Okay. So we've been talking about bias, we've been talking about wonkiness, we've been talking about all these issues of making stuff fit and of laying it out and blocking it. There are borders that go around our medallion before we put those centers on. And I want to talk just a little bit about these borders. It's very important, I know, and again, I'm the kind of person that I used to think, oh, I'm just going to slap the borders on up at the top. It's not going to be any big deal. Well, in here, because we're dealing with so many curves, it can be a very big deal. What I did when I was laying it out, and I'll just grab the centerpiece and show you. We're going to pretend this is the whole quilt here, the whole center medallion. What I did, you take the border strip, right, and cut it, first off, cut it exactly to measure like the pattern says. Exactly those measurements. This is kind of, think of this as your last chance to get it perfectly square, okay? This can kind of straighten everything out and pull everything into line. So what I did, I cut it to the exact length that the measurement said. Then I moved it to the center here. And I pinned it where it needed to go. So we'll say, just ignore that the salvage edge there, just pretend the salvage edge is not there. So I pinned it on, and then where there were different blocks, different strips, and different units, I would pin those to mark that, and then move up to the top and match those pins as I went along. And if I needed to stretch out the border a little bit, it would stretch. If I needed to stretch that segment of the quilt top a little bit, it would stretch to match that as well. This is the technique that I always use for borders. I measure them across the middle, and I pin them, and then I move them. I put in pins to indicate where things should be, and then I move it up to the top and pin it again, and sew. This, like I said, these are your last chance to make this all square. Then when I made the center medallion and I added these guys onto it, I blocked it again. I put it on my design board and spritzed it and blocked it and let it settle and relax until this is the shape you're going to be, square, because that's how you're going to be. So if you need to do that, that is perfectly fine. All right, that's it for the center medallion construction. I'm going to clear this off, and then I'm going to show you how to put the final quilt together. So I'll be right back. All right, it's time to put this beautiful quilt together. I'm going to show you the final assembly, how everything would go together, and a couple of different options of different things that you could do if you want to put it together in a slightly different order. So here we have the center medallion, and we have those beautiful corners that we just finished, and they'll attach there just like so. Then, and these here, bring that up, bring that down, those off to the side, bring that up, bring that down, sides again, bring that up, and bring that down. The assembly shown here is a little bit like the concentric squares that we did. Okay, but another way that you could put it together, which is the way I ended up putting it together, is that, so you assemble the block here in the center, you assemble your center, and then I did these, and I matched them with these three and these three, so I kind of made one center strip that was 3 blocks tall and 3 blocks, and it had the center and these 3 strips, and I put those together. And then I did these 3 as one section together, and these 3 as one section together. That seemed to make a lot of sense to me. Now, what I think is really important with this one, especially because we talked about the directions of these little teardrop fabric, if you chose to make sure you kept track of the direction, I would strongly suggest laying all of this out somewhere that you can, and be sure you do them kind of in order, and that everything is, all the teardrops are going in the right direction, the direction that you want them to go. Again, lay this out, make sure everything's just right before you start to put it all together. And then what I would do also when I sew a portion, I'll lay it back out where I have everything else and make sure, yeah, okay, that's right. So then I can move on, so I don't finish the whole quilt top and find a mistake in row 7, column B. You know, it's not tucked there in the middle. I can fix it before things get too far. So that's it, you guys. Thanks for hanging with me and doing all this together. I hope you really enjoy your quilt. You got it done. If you're keeping up with me, do a little happy dance and enjoy it. I love the colors. I think they're beautiful. So again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.